Chasin The Racin, powered by Colchester Kawasaki. Part of the Global Moto Group, we supply new Aprilia, Moto Guzzi, Vespa, Royal Enfield, Kawasaki, Sim, Mutt and Benelli motorcycles.
3, 2, 1, and welcome back to Chasin The Racin, episode 169. And we're delighted to be joined by Jason Griffiths. We're over in if you're watching this on YouTube, we're not in our usual studio. We've a makeshift studio in Jason Griffiths Motorcycles down in Castletown. And thanks very much for coming on the show. How's things?
Yeah, good. Thanks for the invite.
I'll tell you what, I was thinking on the way over here, I'm thinking, how on earth is the Pirelli Racing Manager, who based in British superbikes where there's no racing in the Isle of Man whatsoever, get to work every day? And I've just realised how close you are to the airport. You've probably got arguably the closest commute to work anyone in the paddock.
Yeah, no, it's a short walk, you're right, yeah, that's okay.
How far are you actually from here then, or is it?
To the airport, you can walk it in 10 anyway, yeah.
Ideal.
A brisk walk, yeah.
That's ideal.
So for each of the British Superbike rounds, do you just find which airport's closest and then or do you tend to have to go to Gatwick?
Well, for the last few years, to be honest, I've been doing the ferry run, so in a van and then do the drive the other side, yeah.
That's torture. That is torture. Hold on, right? For people that don't know, right, the boat takes 4.5 hours.
Nah, you've bigged it up a bit. 3 3/4 on a good.
It feels like
run.
4. It feels like 4.5 hours. Considering the journey it's going to do. Tell you what, a bit of island politics. When's this new boat turning up?
I think it's sometime next year, but
Right.
yeah, I should know more than I do, but I believe it's next year. Yeah.
Well, you're never here, to be fair. You're never here. So,
Going off your accent, I presume you were originally Welsh.
Yeah. You
What
well
accent?
spotted there, Chris. Yeah.
what accent?
What brought you over here?
Well, I got married here, so I met my wife at the TT, so that was the reason, yeah. So it's a long time now. I've been here really 26 years, I think, something like that.
You haven't lost your accent at all, have you?
Well, maybe it's gone off a little bit, but people tell me not, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well,
keep it in the blood, son.
Whereabouts originally were you from?
It's a Pontypool in South Wales, which is about 10 miles from Newport.
Okay, and were you did you used to speak Welsh?
No, I'm not a Welsh speaker, so no.
Is there a language over here? Is there like a Manx?
Yeah, they got Manx Gaelic here, which is there's in the schools now it's encouraged the same as Welsh is back in Wales and that type of thing. Yeah,
So
keep the language going. Yeah,
The kids,
Right.
kids get to get taught both languages.
Well, there's a school that specialises in it, so. You're obviously from an education background, not so much me, so I don't know too much of the detail, but they are trying to keep it going, yeah.
I just noticed on, I think it was like St. Ninian's Road or something, and then underneath it had like Nan, like something else, like a different language.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
Have you noticed that?
I'll tell you what, we've got a bad reputation on this show for getting names wrong. This one episode we did ages ago, there was a Dubliner, and we could not get his name right. Owen, Owen, right? Guess who was in front of me and signing on queue? And he just turned around and pointed in my face and went, "You and Chrissy cannot say my name for the love of God." I'm like, we're not going down that route again, the pronunciation route. I'm telling you that for now.
It's in Irish.
Potpourri, his name
it's
is
spelled like was it something like Eoin or something?
Eon. something like it was nothing like Owen at all. Like not a bit. And his surname was closer to potpourri than anything else. And he's right in front of me in this queue. I thought I was going to get slapped, rightly so as well.
So going back right to the start, obviously we'll have a sort of run through of your career, but I'm aware your father was a successful rider himself.
Yeah, he rode here, yeah.
Sort of born straight into the racing paddock.
Yeah, in a way, yeah, really, and the motorcycle business as well then, really, because that's what he did. So yeah, all linked in, really, yeah.
And was he a pure roadsman, or did he used to do shorts?
No, he would have been, Cadwell Park and I mean going back Silloth and places back in the day. So did a lot of that stuff, yeah. Mm-hmm. And then obviously really keen on the TT. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what's your sort of earliest memories of the paddock?
We'll be coming to the TT, but probably, I don't know, it'd be 75 or something like that, I guess, yeah. And being around then, travelling in the van with the bikes in the van and that sort of thing, boat across, and yeah. And that's the early memories anyway.
So you met your other half at a race meeting. What about your dear mother? Did she just come in blindly to the world of motorcycles?
I think she was working here, so that's where they met here. Yeah. So it was another one of those coincidences. Yeah.
Someone in the Isle of Man women, you see, there you are. It must be simple as that. Have you got kids yourself then?
Yeah, no, I got 4 girls. Yeah.
4?
Yeah, 4 girls.
Bloody hell. Bloody hell.
Did any of them ride?
No motorcycle racing, luckily for me, yeah.
Luckily for the bank, that's for sure. Yeah. So, going back to your father's sort of racing career, so he came over here, did the TT many times.
Yeah,
I've seen he got a podium, and did he win a Manx?
He did a Manx, senior Manx in 64, and then went on to the TT and did it, I guess, right up to about 76, I think, something like that, yeah.
And from a young age, did you always have in mind that you would, a little bit like Dom, sort of following his dad, were you similar?
Yeah, not sort of totally, really. I did a bit of schoolboy motocross for a few years and then didn't do anything for a couple of years before I started road racing. So it wasn't I didn't move straight from one to the other. There was a break in it, really. Mm-hmm. But and then I decided I wanted to go with it.
Yeah, and
so what age was that then? So when was the break between that?
Well, my first road race was halfway through 1990, so I would have been 20 then, I think, yeah. And I would have stopped motocrossing at probably 17, 18, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What's the worst break you've had then in motocross?
No, not too bad in that.
Really?
She came out of it fairly well. Just, minor things like a wrist and stuff, really, but nothing.
What, you about to say like a female?
No, none of the serious stuff like that. Yeah, right. Got away with that. Yeah.
So where did you get to in your motocross element? Was it just schoolboy? Did you go do British? Did you?
Just schoolboy stuff, yeah, and schoolboy nationals and whatever. But then didn't really make the move to the adult stuff. That was when I stopped, really, and it took a couple of years before the road racing thing came along.
So were you just fed up with motocross, fed up with motorbikes and thought, I want 2 years off? What did you do in them 2 years?
Yeah, I know, it's just one of those things. I think when you finished in the schoolboy, you had to move on, and I decided really it wasn't for me. So
right.
So that was it. Took a break from that. I did help someone motocrossing for a little while, so I went along spannering, so that filled the gap for a while.
Right.
And then gave up on that, and then found my way into the road racing stuff, really.
Because I'll tell you what, it's one question that a lot of people ask themselves, and we've talked about it many a times. It's like, what would you do if you weren't involved in motorcycles? And I have no idea what you would do, but I would love to know. There's a good question for you. What would you do if you weren't involved in motorcycles?
I don't know. It's been that long now, really, and sort of, still involved in it on the business side as well. So it's hard to find a way out, I think, really.
Your whole sort of life's orientated around it, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And next week, Pirelli Manager packs in, job becomes a cowboy, something like that, realisation.
So, do you know when you started racing on tarmac, was it straight into pure road racing?
No, well, my father was sponsored by Ray Cowles, who was a well-known Welsh sponsor. And Ray he helped all sorts of people, depending on how much you know about the history. People like John Hartle, who was a world championship rider back in the day. And then you can go on through to trying to think. Gary Hislop rode the bike. Brian Reed rode one of his bikes. So and then Ian Lucker, of course, won the Junior TT in 1990, and I was involved. I was there for that.
Right.
Did the Northwest with them that year. A couple of European Championship rounds. So that was when really I got the interest picked up.
Yeah.
So I did a race. First race was Darley Moor in July 1990.
Right.
On a 250 Yamaha.
And you were still down in Wales at this point?
Yeah.
That's a canny commute, constantly you think Pembury.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah. It's just the way it fell that was the first one that was, a Darley race. And remember it, beautiful day, and getting lapped by Jimmy Brown. It was, that was the standout. He was a good 250 man.
Were you like, this is not for me at this point, or?
Yeah, it was one of those where if you just, his first time on the tarmac, isn't it? And you're fish out of water, really. But
you've got to start somewhere.
Yeah. And, Darley's a strange layout with those couple of chicanes in it.
That's a triangle with two. The world's smallest Northwest 200, isn't it?
What is it about Welsh tracks and how grippy they are? No, with Pembury and Anglesey are like the two grippiest tracks, apart from Thruxton. You'd say Thruxton, Pembury and Anglesey are the grippiest tracks in the wet. Have you ridden either of them in the wet? they're like the difference between a fast dry time and a fast wet time at Anglesey is like 3-4 seconds.
Shut up,
man. Same as Pembrey. Pembrey, you used to be able to get your knee down with dry tyres on it in the wet. It's like literally outstanding.
Yeah.
But what is it about?
Well, it's some long time since I rode at Pembrey, but I'm trying to think the last time I would have rode, it was about 94 probably. So, and strangely enough, I've never been to the track at Anglesey, so I can't comment on that.
I thought you were about to say he was going to crash in the wet. I crashed there, Chris.
It's a funny little track, Pembrey, and it doesn't really get used. Obviously, Thundersport used to use it a lot.
Yeah.
But I think Dave fell out with the guy who owns it, and that they no longer go, which is fortunate for me because actually it's one of the only lap records that I still hold because they stopped using this. So therefore I've kept it for good. But and also I think
for good. That's a challenge. If anyone out there would like to dig out a bike,
CRMC. I think
they still use it. Yeah. It's what. Why would British not go there?
It's not really up to scratch, is it, in terms of the facilities and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going back then. It was I think they called it the Heat Super Cup or something. That was the last time that a major British Championship race, I guess, would have been there.
That first corner would be carnage.
Yeah, no, but you're talking then. It was obviously Hizzy was there on an RC45. Wow. Phil Bawley would have been on a Deckham's Norton and all those guys. It was the full. Simon Creefer, I think, something like that. So proper race,
proper do it. Like a massive roll as you go around the last corner. So as you go onto the straight, I only rode a 125 around there, but I remember you used to like be tucked in, go through the last corner, and then it was like a big, up and down. Yeah. I remember one. It was like my second ever race meeting was at Pembrey, and I'd have been battling for like 20th position or something in the race, and last lap, last corner, I dive bombed 2 people. Like it was like a stupid move because I could have wiped them both out, but like I dive bombed both of them, and my dad was watching on that corner, and I remember like had like an 8-hour drive home, and I remember we both went home like on cloud 9 because I'd got like 20th instead of 22nd. And it's like it was so irrelevant, but it's just one of them funny things that. But so from the, like say, Darley Moor and getting your hand in, was it a case of, did you start like club racing over there?
Yeah, would have done a couple that year. I think Darley, and the second one would have been Castle Combe, which was a North Gloucester race. They were big grids back then. Lots of 250s and 350s back then.
Castle Combe's and so Darley Moor and Castle Combe, both tracks I've never been to.
You've never done Castle Combe's good.
I know Castle Combe gets used quite a lot for the TT testing, doesn't it?
Is that
because of is it a similar tarmac or similar bumps?
Yeah, it's as close. Into you obviously can't replicate what you're going to run into at the TT. It's just not possible. But at least Castle Combe, it's not as bumpy as it used to be. As with most places, they keep obviously improving these places. So, but it's high speed. It's got some high speed corners and some bumps there. So it's as close as you can get really. Thruxton would be another good one, but it's nigh on impossible to get onto Thruxton. So that's a difficulty there.
I'll tell you what. While we're talking about that, we've just finished like the Thruxton round at the BSB there. Like even before I go down that question, why don't they use Thruxton as much as they can?
And noise restrictions, I think so. Local residents,
classic
basically.
One. Yeah. There wasn't any local residents. It was just off the motorway. I didn't see any local residents at all.
It is more or less in the middle of nowhere, isn't it? And it's a shame it doesn't get used more because it's a.
You can tell me diesel bill that.
I bet from the sort of tyre manufacturer point of view as well, I bet you got that it doesn't get used much more because every 5 laps you need a new set of tyres. It's like ching 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 ching.
Well, that can present problems as well, that Chris. So it's never an ideal, but it was a from our side it was a great weekend. I mean, if you told me we were going to Thruxton and then you told me it was going to be 47 degrees track temperature, I would have expected it to be challenging, but really pleased with how it went.
I know we'll jump into this and we could go back to your racing career, but do you get like in that case when we're going Thruxton and it's hot, is the pressure on your shoulders to like, because obviously if things go wrong, is it you that people turn to be like, what's going on?
Yeah, I mean obviously from until the weekend's finished, the checker flag goes out on the last one, you've never got the job boxed off, but now from my perspective, when you looked at the conditions for the whole weekend, and how, if you like, ferocious the superbike races were, for example, it was tough stuff. And no, we're really pleased. You know, the material performed really well. So we came out of there with what I think was a strong weekend. Yeah.
At what point is it like too hot for it? Like, because what range of tires have you got? I end up asking this question every time with the Pirelli questions, but because you got the 0, the X, you know, what temperature maximum have they got for that? Because like you're saying, 47 degree temperature.
In terms of temperature, you were definitely in the X's condition, but you got to look at the abrasion then and the circuit layout. And for example, we decided at the beginning of the year that we'd only use the 0 option for Thruxton. And if you notice, World Superbike were at Most shortly before us with a brand new surface, very abrasive, and they'd gone the same route, so it was the SC0 that was used there. I mean, you'd normally, when the 0 first came along, obviously high temperature was one of its a benefit of using the tyre.
Yeah.
And initially, you would say a smooth, low grip asphalt is where its benefits are, but it stood up to Thruxton and has done very well, you know.
Just for the benefit of the people listening in, do you want to just give a quick rundown on what your official title is at Pirelli and what your job entails?
Yeah, well, I'm racing manager for the UK. So obviously, as far as BSB goes, it's the sort of delivery of the event on site from our side, and then away from the track, it's really production planning, production organising, you know, and the logistics, getting the stuff to the track. So obviously you're talking about lots of tyres and working to that schedule, you know. Are
you involved with the performance side, like improving the performance side of the tyre?
No, I mean, from the development side, obviously initially there's a test team based in Italy, but they obviously do some of the initial work. But then, obviously, with Pirelli being involved in World Superbike, you're fortunate if you've got Jonathan Ray as a test rider, or Scott Redding, or any one of those names, Bautista, that you want to throw out there. When they move a new tyre or a new spec to World Superbike tests, obviously the World Superbike official tests are perfect because you've got all of the factory teams there running on the track in the same conditions at the same time. So, getting a balance of a product that hopefully works across all manufacturers. That's a real asset, really, of being able to test in that way, you know.
And do you know, say, going to a British Superbike meeting, how many Arctic lorries do you take, and how many sets of tyres on like an average weekend?
I mean, in terms of number of tyres, you're probably looking at, or you would be looking at, over 3,000 tyres. And a crew of around about 15 people.
Jesus.
Yeah, so it's a big undertaking.
And without going down the political route too much, but since like Brexit and getting a hold of things, because that's what they're manufactured in Italy, is that correct?
Well, no, the production is in Germany actually.
Oh, right.
Yeah, outside of Frankfurt. So that's where all of the stuff that BSB uses is produced.
Because a lot of people, like not a lot of people, but people that are saying that it's quite hard to get a hold of tyres in general, like tyre distributors for like club meetings and such like that.
Yeah.
So is that the whole Brexit thing just made your life twice as hard or 3 times as hard?
Well, one of the benefits is obviously because of the size of BSB, it has a priority within the company,
right,
the motorcycle side of the business. You're right. Obviously, Brexit also coincided with the pandemic, so it was a double whammy really on supply. If you think back to 2020, there was a lot of uncertainty about when the series would even start. So that was fairly interesting, and I think 6 rounds for the remainder of that year.
Yeah.
But I guess in a way the bigger challenge was probably 21, when we started on the 25th of June and did 11 rounds before mid-October or whatever it was. So that was a bit of a curveball. A lot of tyres move in short times then,
Have you been over to Germany to see the production?
Yeah, he's a wagon driver. Yeah. So when he's not here, he's off to get more tyres from Germany.
Do you have a good understanding of like what actually goes into the tyres to make them? And that's it?
Well, it's changed now. Obviously, there's a lot of robot production now. Even when I first started with the company. So my first season was 2007. there was still a lot more of a human element then in the production. But now it's moved on again, so it is different.
And do you know, who was I speaking to recently? They said they'd been over to do World Superbike Wildcard, and they said the World Superbike tyres were much better than the BSB tyres. Is that true?
Well, for example, when we talked about Moss, they used the same SC0 that you ran at Thruxton.
Right, okay.
In terms of the front tyre, it's the same SC1 front. There's also at the minute a development SC1 front. I can't remember exactly, but for example, it's quite possible that Top Rack used a standard SE1 front and Jonathan Ray might have used a development one. So it doesn't always follow that what's new or different is what they use, So you see these specifications appear there first, and then the decision is made on, is it better? And, there's obviously, when you're working in a controlled tyre environment, if a tyre is significantly better for one manufacturer, that's obviously not achieved the aim. You need parity as best you can across all manufacturers.
I remember a while ago I did a few European rounds, and it ran a different system to BSB. So BSB, you get a tyre allowance. So for example, in Superbikes, you're allowed to buy 8 sets a weekend, plus if you get through to Q2, you get another set. But you buy them as you go and you choose what you want. And also, once you've bought them, they're your property, and you can either you can use them for scrubs, you can sell them as scrubs. There's various things you can do. In World Superbikes, you had to pay up front for your tyres for the weekend, and then if it was wet, and say you'd bought like 6 sets of slicks, and you only got to use 2 sets, the other 4 sets they would put a knife through them.
Shut up, man.
No, does that still happen?
And yet you've paid for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, going back now, I don't know what they do now, but it used to be within the entry fee. So I don't know whether so almost everything's included in the entry fee, so it doesn't strip out the tyres as such. That's the difference. As I say, in BSB, every single tyre is invoiced, so some riders will obviously use more than others.
Yeah.
If someone put a knife through my tyre, they'd be like slapping my missus. That'd be hell on.
Well, they weren't classed as yours because you weren't allowed to take them away.
Yeah.
It would still break me heart. That's like cancelling Christmas for a bear, and that'd be like, how dare you do that to a tyre?
In terms of, do you know when you make anything in production, there's always a range. So if you go to like a Domino's pizza and you got like 10 pizzas, there's going to be ones that are made slightly better than the others. There's got to be some range, but obviously as a tyre manufacturer you're wanting to close that range as closely as possible. From the very best set of tyres that come off production to the very worst set, around say ManxGP, what do you think the difference is performance?
Oh, you thought of that one before you came here, didn't you? That's not mediocre crap, that is it? I love it.
I think, when you're talking about, we're using in BSB normal production tyres in the Superbike class. Okay, Super Stock or Stock 1000 and Super Sport use a special production tyre. Mm-hmm. But even then, because they're only made basically for us in the UK because we've requested them, they're made in large volumes, it's large volume production. So, for example, SC0, the factory probably doesn't produce a smaller run than 500 or 600 tyres. So the machine starts and they keep it going, obviously, and then they're all cured together on the same time and that sort of thing. So in terms of any difference between the tyre, we would say no. Obviously, once the tyre leaves us, then it's out of our control. So the variables being whoever's looking after the tyre warmer, how long they do that for, the pressure gauge, how accurate it is, and then obviously the setting of the bike and many other things. So once it's gone from us, this product then it's down to how it's prepared really. And
so of the ones that could come straight off the production line, are you saying that there's not much of a difference between them all? They're all very similar.
We'd say because the compound is mixed together and all those processes happen at the same time.
Yeah.
And there's a robot running the job, so no not prone to any human error there.
Is that going back over the years? Has that always been the case, or has there ever been a case where like that like a certain batch is better than the other, and you can like say when you were racing yourself, did you always look for something on the like?
No, I think it was just if you went back, there was more chance of something happening to one tyre. If the machine operator had some grease or something on the fingers, then obviously that type of thing can have a bit of an effect,
And also, even from when I started racing to now, I remember when I started racing, it was a big thing to like scrub your tyres in. You'd even sometimes go out in a warm-up, just scrub your tyres in before race, where that is like a mental concept for me now, because that seems to have changed over the years.
Yeah.
When did that change, and what was that change?
I mean, obviously, I raced in the days of pre-tyre warmers as well, so it was totally different then. You obviously had you were warming the tyre as well as scrubbing them in, So, but since, the advent of tyre warmers, really the whole thing has changed. I mean, people used to worry more about front tyres, obviously, but that's not the case now. You're out lap and, like you say, you're on the grid and you go for the warm-up lap and that's it, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
I remember watching, I remember doing I did a wild card in like 600s, going from club meetings. Everyone had the knee down out of pit lane, out of Alton Park. I'm going, well, that's a mind blower. First time I ever run on Pirellis, I just go, you could not do that on any other tyre. You just couldn't.
Another thing as well is, so I don't personally run this myself purely down to a budget, but you can run a tyre pressure monitoring system in British Superbikes. So you can have it does the pressure and the temperature, doesn't it? So it's inside the wheel, and it can feed back to the data, so you can see exactly on what lap and everything. You can monitor the tyre pressure and the tyre temperature.
That must take some counterbalancing.
Why is that?
I've not seen this system, but you think you've got to sense it. It must be by the...
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously quite a variety of sensors as well. So obviously the more expensive ones tend to be smaller. So
how much would that cost then?
Well, you can spend a lot of money. I mean, the first people who came in the British paddock with it were Honda Racing.
Remember, you need 6 sets of wheels, and they need to be on all the wheels. So it's it is quite a bit.
So it's a big investment initially.
It's about 20 grand. Isn't it?
If you go with one of the leading systems, for sure.
What's from before that to now? What's been the big lessons learned from tyre pressure monitoring system?
Well, I think, Chris, for example, someone would say that my tyre in the first part of qualifying was perfect, and the second tyre wasn't as good, and well, what was different? Well, nothing was different, but when you've got TPMS, you can see you spot a variation between two tyre warmers. Obviously, one's not working as efficiently as another. So in the past, to say everything was the same, everything was never the same. It wasn't possible to know that everything was the same. Mm-hmm. What it allows now is when they have somebody managing this side of the garage well, and with all the data they've got, they're able to put everything out there as close as possible to being the same as the last tyre.
Yeah, sure. And does it depend on the track temperature and the ambient temperature, or is there an optimal tyre temperature?
It very much depends on where you are, as you say, the circuit layout, and then obviously ambient things come into it as well. You'll even see differences between riders, of course, so how much spinning's going on and stuff like that. So
And what's the sort of range of
between different manufacturers on the same circuit, you'll see differences for sure.
From the monitoring system, what sort of range would you tend to see on track?
Well, I think if you go back to Fruxton, which is freshest in mind, I guess, you'd see one of the manufacturers was running at 100 degrees
in the rear.
Yeah.
Holy.
Yeah. But you'd see another make of motorcycle would probably run 10 degrees cooler than that,
Yeah.
And obviously people get caught up in surface temperatures, flash temperatures on the surface, but obviously what's happening inside the tyre is more important, really, and keeping that as consistent as you can. That gets you what you're really looking at is obviously the last 5 laps of the race, and that's where all this work brings the benefit, because if you damage the tyre, basically if you're running under pressure or whatever you're doing, you're going to do the damage early in the race, but you don't see the negative side of it until you've shortened the life cycle of the tyre, basically. And that's when you start to struggle. So somebody managing it well in the garage certainly helps the rider,
When did the policing come in with tyre pressures?
2019.
2019.
Right.
Yeah.
So what was that like? Why did that get enforced? Is it just was such a clear advantage?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it would have been Silverstone 2018 when they'd resurfaced the national circuit there, which, as you know, you basically just keep turning right in reality. So
yeah,
that was very, very difficult for the tyre, and that's where the importance of this really came along. And it was after that, actually, it was for the beginning of 19 that Honda Racing came with the TPMS,
right,
which is a McLaren system, actually. So you can see the level of technology. And they were able to find out lots of things, straight away, lots of interesting data, really. And that benefited. And then as, the benefits become obvious, other teams come on board. But there is, it's a significant cost, so it's not something that everybody can really get into straight away.
And speaking of the different compounds you mentioned, so like say in BSB, there's a SC0 and SCX normally. In what situation would you choose to run the zero? When does that? Is there a temperature where it then becomes an advantage to run the zero?
47 degrees Buxton.
As you'll know from what you're doing, the SCX is very versatile. Surprising that such a soft compound can handle lower temperatures the way that it does. So really, the zero has become less used. Obviously, we made it mandatory from our side for Silverstone and Thruxton. And, from my perspective, that's also quite interesting because a rider who wouldn't choose that tyre has to then work with it, so it's pretty good that at
Tough
least,
shit, sunshine.
you've got an 11-round series, and for two of them, that you're going to have to work with that tyre.
So is it a temperature thing? So if it gets below a certain temperature, you'd have to go to a zero?
Yeah, well, I would say so. It will depend on the circuit as well. I mean, we'd probably be talking, I don't know, you'd need to see the track probably under 15 degrees or something like that.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And also...
And again, the short race on a Saturday will be easier for the softer tyre than the longer race in those conditions. Another 4 or 5 laps could be swing the balance,
And what about the front tyre? So there's the 1 and the 2. The 2 is the harder of the two compounds. The 1 tends to be the choice for most riders. But why would you, in what situation would you choose a 2?
Well, the 2's a lot less used than it used to be. I mean, the 1 has always been the more favoured tyre. But going back to whenever it would be now, I think 2020, we came with the current, what we call the big sizes, which was the bigger diameter and the wider front tyre. And that removed the use of the 2 even further. There's more support than with the previous size tyre. So there were more riders able to use SC1. I think I can remember at the time that it came along, Jonathan Ray would have been an SC2 user with the old in inverted commas 120/70 size, and he was able to move across to the new shape. When you're looking at somebody who rides, as aggressively as he can, it tells you a story that there's obviously more support from this size and shape. Thruxton was a little bit different because temperature played a role in that, and we sold, more SC2s were fitted than at any point this year by a long way,
And was that because of the high temperature?
Temperature played a role in that, yeah.
So that makes no sense.
Why is that? So if the temperature goes up, you would go harder compound?
No, it's normally the other way around.
Well, in terms of rear tyres, with our range, generally the rule of thumb would be as the temperature goes up, you go softer for the rear tyre.
In layman's terms, because obviously we get a lot of listeners who just want to look at Chrissy's face and they don't understand motorcycles one bit, But why the hell does that work? Because when I first went racing, it was like, it's cold. Get a soft, grippy tyre on it. In layman's terms, can you explain that?
Well, it's obviously the chemistry is different between the different tyre manufacturers. Right. And from our side, if you run, something that's too soft on a cold track, you'll just encourage cold tear. So that's what happens. The front tyre is really down to rider preference, rider feel.
Right. There we are.
You know, you could say SC2 on a cold track, you know, you get less feel from the tyre. So the rider needs to be a rider that's confident to push and, you know, and ride without getting that sort of feedback. You know, because I've been doing this a long time, if I go step back to sort of 2018 and you think of Leon Haslam in his championship year on the Kawasaki 120/70, the again old size in inverted commas, he'd ride on a 2, and it, you know, it could be Donington and it could be cold, but Carina curves doesn't matter. You know, he just obviously able to make it work. But not all riders can ride like that.
He wanted the harder compounds, or like hard on the brakes. It was giving them more support.
Yes,
but accepting that he's going to have less grip. I'm just going back to thrust.
I think in a way you got to believe in the grip. You just get less. You get less movement. You get less feeling back through the bars. You know, feeling is a thing. But if you can rely on pushing and make sure you're working it hard, that's something that some riders can do.
Beliefs are strong.
I'm a little bit confused about the SE2s at Thruxton though. So what, in theory, why were people thinking that was a good idea?
Because it's not a breaky circuit. I've never raced around there myself, but
I think you know a lot of it. Really, once you get the temperature up that high, you know you get relatively low grip and everything gets a greasy feel about it. But it was, and again, not across the board, but more of them probably. I think there were a maximum of 9 riders in one of the races that used the SC2. And, you know, usually we would maybe see 2 or 3, and that would be unusual now because it's predominantly SC1. So.
Were there 9 riders near the front?
Well, the top 3 definitely were, but they were SC1, you know. The Yamaha is a...
Oh, SC1?
Yeah, they were SC1, but you were going... if I think of who was running on SC2s, I mean, Christian Idden and Danny Kemp would have been SC2 riders for sure.
Yeah.
Danny Buchan, I think Andrew Irwin went to SC2, so yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I tell you what, I've got a question for the pair of you. What would be the worst track if someone said it's 47 degrees track temperature? What would make your arse nip thinking, here we come, here we go, you know? Because that greasy feeling's an interesting comment that you said there.
Yeah. In terms of my job and you know, having the tyre deliver.
Yeah.
Now, if you'd asked me a couple of years ago, I would probably have said Silverstone National.
Really?
But that's settled down in terms of the asphalt now. So the hardest one would have been where we've just exited, really. Yeah.
Well, right.
You know, when we stayed with full distance races, as Mr. Higgs had mapped them out, you know, so...
Definitely delivered some good races, my God. When all you see on bloody social media is those last couple of laps in Superbike, it was just outstanding.
Yeah, class. I did have another question for you. I want to go back to speaking about your career, but do you also have an involvement with the road racing side of Pirelli?
Yeah. So Metzeler, hence we're at a road race. So yeah, Metzeler.
Is Metzeler and Pirelli the same company, just two different brands?
Yeah, I mean, if you go back, I don't know the date, but it probably would have been early 90s. I think that Pirelli bought the Metzeler brand. If you go back far enough, obviously they're 2 separate companies.
Right.
But since then, Pirelli have owned it. And in terms of motorcycle racing, Metzeler is prominent in enduro, off-road, and supermoto from the company side of things. And then road racing, which this program started in 2013, I think, from memory, was when the Metzeler road race program started.
Is it that young? I thought, just assuming, I thought it would be...
Yeah, I mean, if you go back, again, because I've been around so long, I remember, Foggy winning the F1 World Championship on Metzeler, I think, in 1988 or something.
There we are,
that. Yeah. Where that would have predated the Pirelli owning the company, you know.
See, pardon my ignorance, I always thought it was just a creation from Pirelli. You know what I mean? It's been that much of a partnership. I didn't realise there were rivals.
It goes right back to then.
Back when Superstock used to be Metzeler, when they changed over to Pirelli, all of the lap records got smashed that year by like a good way. So the Pirelli was definitely a good step ahead of the Metzeler. Has that gap sort of closed up now? Like, for example, now if you've got a Metzeler tyre for BSB, would it be the same as the Pirelli? Or
well, there's always some differences in the range. I mean, this is the first year that Metzeler now has the current sizes, the big sizes that we use, 125, 70, 265. So they only came into the Metzeler range for this year. So there are times, when there'll be something available in Pirelli that differs from Metzeler. And in terms of the treaded tyres that we use with Metzeler, obviously they were built to be able to be used for road racing. And the significant difference is always the centre of the tyre because of the high speed. And not only high speed, but also the fact that it's bumpy, so the tyre leaves the road a lot. And obviously meets the road again at pretty high speed. So there has to be, a centre compound that will handle that safely.
And you were saying about how World Superbikes are developing the controlled series tyres, and you're saying that's getting transported internally. So surely the Metzeler tyres from the Northwest and the TT, they must be coming straight back to you. And then where do they go from that point to improve development, shall we say?
What for what we do for the following year in road racing? Yeah. I mean, it's a dedicated program that's obviously predominantly UK focused.
Yeah.
I mean, you probably know more. You may have ridden in the IRC or IRRC, whatever it is.
No, I'd love to though. No, I've always fancied it.
So obviously there's road racing going on there, but the focus of this of the project is the UK, Northwest and TT led. Obviously Elsa Grand Prix when it was.
Hopefully that's coming back. There's rumours on the. Do you know anything about those rumours?
Nope.
Damn it.
I'm not up
Thought
to
we had
date
an
on that
exclusive
one,
there.
Yeah. And then Macau when it was. Obviously, which hasn't run for a few years.
Because you've won them a few years in a row now with Glenn Irwin.
Yeah, we did. We've done well there, and in the past, again, Stuart Easton and people like that. So,
Has he still got the lap record, Stuart Easton? I think he does,
Yeah.
You can't drink for toffee. I know he listens to this.
Do you know, in terms of the Metzeler versus Dunlop sort of battle going on, this year's obviously been a fantastic year for Metzeler, and a lot of it down to the issues Dunlop have had. Have you got any sort of justification or reasoning of what happened to Dunlop this year?
No, I mean, the road racing activity. I think first of all, if you look at these events, and obviously Dom is involved, and you look at the tyre companies that are involved, you've got two major brands there.
Yes.
So there's not a. I don't like to mention other brands, but you've not got other major brands. They're not involved in that side of the sport at all.
So, like Chrissy says, they've definitely like Dunlop and Metzeler have totally taken the forefront of road racing. Like Mitchell have got a little bit of a presence and stuff like that. Bridgestone haven't got a presence. There's that many different brands like you were saying.
Can I just ask, is that because the other brands here, like Bridgestone and Michelin, is that because they're not competitive, or is it because they've focused on world endurance and other things?
Yeah, I mean, again, I keep going back to when I first would have appeared around the TT, you were looking at 5 or 6 tyre manufacturers' trucks there, obviously you had 125s and 250s back then, as well as 400s, so there was and morning and evening practices, so the volume at the TT was much bigger. There were more riders in more classes with more practice for a start, and you had the various production races, so there was a lot of racing going on. The thing has obviously gradually evolved into what we've got now. So it's expensive to be involved in, definitely. It's time consuming as well. You do need, or at least we think you need, special product. So, that's the boring side of the business, if you like. The commercial side of it, particularly during and now post-pandemic, there's been an awful lot of pressure on production. Material shortages, you've got the business people, the accountants in the business, obviously they don't want you making things that you're not going to use.
Yes.
They want to make things that they can sell. So it's very difficult. And again, if you look at the Northwest 200 this year, I think what it illustrates is how important the tyre manufacturers are, particularly to that type of activity. And I'm obviously somebody who's been around that part of racing for a long time and been involved in it myself, so it does show that it's important that there are at least 2 manufacturers wanting to be involved and hopefully staying involved. You know?
Yes, 100% agree.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, do you feel like since the main championships of when single tyre manufacturers of BSB World Superbikes, MotoGP, and that's eliminated the competition element of it, do you feel like the speed of development, do you think that's hampered the development of the tyres?
I mean, I can only sort of comment generally on the other series, you know. Looking from our side, I'd say Pirelli has tried to push and kept pushing. Again, I think, you know, in MotoGP, there's so much focus on MotoGP that they have to keep improving, and, you know, the riders are vocal when they don't appreciate what they've been given to use. So, you know, they need to keep pushing. I mean, it's interesting. I can remember in terms of MotoGP when it would have been Bridgestone first, that Michelin were very vocal about how they disagreed with, you know, single tyre supply. You move forward to whatever it would have been, 10, 15 years and a different set of management, and who's supplying MotoGP now? Yeah, things change. Nothing stays the same.
Yeah, they get pulled up on quotes all the time. Remember when you said this? Oh, forget about that. Don't worry about that.
Yeah. So, you know, nothing stays the same like that. It's good that at least there's a number of manufacturers involved, you know, that they do MotoGP, obviously Dunlop, Moto2 and Moto3.
Yes.
Pirelli and World Superbike. So, yeah.
And spread. You weren't kidding about the rain. He did jinx it. He did jinx it on the way in. So we'll have to get Grace and Chris. You do the audio. So good luck on editing this bit out. So the rain has hit us.
And obviously we're here in your showroom on the Isle of Man, just down in Castletown.
It's a sale, 100% off everything. You want to get down now?
The door's locked.
Yes, with you behind it. There you go.
Bike shop down here. So. Are you is it multi-franchise here, or do you have a particular?
Yeah, no, we're, I'll say it alphabetically, I guess, Kawasaki, Suzuki and Triumph. Yeah.
And used bikes as well?
Yeah, used bikes as well.
How long have you had this place?
Well, we've been in this building for coming up for 5 years, but I've been trading now for over 15.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
And as well as selling the bikes, do you hire bikes over here?
Yeah, we do that. It's
right.
Primarily event-based, so TT is the major one. Obviously nothing for the last couple of years, but yeah.
That's a great idea,
for people coming in and flying in for the TT, if they were interested in, say, hiring a bike and some gear and stuff, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, we tend to do it. It's easier done by email, so then we know what's going on and when.
Say your email address so people have got it.
It's sales@jasongriffiths.im. Yeah, and a lot of it is you know, when it's TT, you're looking at Americans and
and if you just put like Chasin The Racin in the subject, we'll just say 10% commission.
Double your prices and we'll take 10%. Simple as that. We wish. We bloody wish.
Mind, it is great. It is great. TT week, all of the international fans coming around. It's like a proper celebration of bikes, isn't it? Like you say, America. I've got some American friends that come over here that absolutely love it.
Yeah, no, it's you know, it's widened in that way. You see,
such a unique.
So many Australians, you know, and whatever. Yeah.
And
you just won't let Geordies on now.
Yeah.
Any Geordies coming in off the flight? No, sorry, get stuffed. 100% get stuffed.
Going back to your TT career, you actually popped up in we do a newsletter, Chasin The Racin newsletter now and again, and one of the newsletters we did were the best riders to never win a TT, so the ones that came closest, and that you
delivered that nice and subtly.
You were mentioned in that, along with, I mean, there's some fantastic riders that are in that list, isn't there? But saying that, with 13 podiums to your name, 13 podiums at the Isle of Man TT is a hell of an achievement, isn't it? And take us back to the start, so like starting at the Manx, I presume.
Yeah, I did. Well, obviously, as I said, you know, Ian Luckard won the junior in 1990 on Ray Cowles' 250 Yamaha. I was back the following year. He ran Robert Dunlop that year, and Robert won the junior in 91. So I was in that pit stop as well. So that was good. And then I did the newcomers Manx in that year in 91. So I had that 250 Yamaha, which had won the TT that year. So it wasn't a shabby bike.
No, I tell you what, I did pull a cracking photo off the wall. You thought I was going to nick it at first, but this is why I wanted to bring it. Now, I'm going to put this up to the camera, so you'll have to get on YouTube for the people who just listen to this on the audio. But that is an outstanding photo. Is that the year you were talking about there?
Yeah, so that's actually Aberdare Park in
Aberskare.
Yeah, and in June, that would probably be late June or early July in '91. So he's just won the TT on the bike he's got his hand on. The other bike is the bike that Ian Lucker won the TT on the year before.
So you set it up for him?
Yeah.
They are.
so that's those two bikes. He'd just won the final and I'd finished second, so it was a 1-2 there. Yeah.
That's mint. I tell you what, I'm loving the levers, mind. The Bob Heath visor spray. That is. Was that like a personal sponsor?
Well, that was. I then rode the Manx on an RC30 belonging to Bob, the Newcomers Manx, and that was a bike where Foggy had used the engine at Daytona, and it had the HRC flat slide carburetors on it. It was a proper bit of kit, that thing. Yeah. So that was, but that was, I hadn't ridden a 750, which were obviously the big class then, until we went to the Manx. So it was sort of straight onto a bigger bike.
So you went your first experience on a big bike was shooting off down Bray Hill.
Yeah, well, I'd run it in on the roads. And it was a Tony Scott engine, and back then, where I lived in South Wales, you could ride around and put some miles on it. So that was good. Yeah.
Were you still living at home at this point?
Yeah.
All right,
yeah.
Fair play.
Yeah.
So I tell you what, we were talking about the schoolboy had a couple of years off, and then at what point did you think this is serious for me now? Because you've got your photo that is a fantastic photo of you and Robert Dunlop having the crack, setting up bikes. At what point did you think I'm starting to get something out of this kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it was I suppose I did the few races in 1990. And then the beginning of 91, it just sort of clicked really, and I started the Win Club races then.
Yeah.
And then obviously when you're spending time in company of a legend like that, you ask questions and things rub off, don't you? And I mean, the guy was, he was something else. In terms of racecraft, and understanding the motorcycle. I mean, it was when Robert really was on the way up when he got hurt. He was already a master of the small bike classes, but
yes.
He'd started to ride that RC45 really well. He'd ridden the Norton well, obviously, So I mean, when I was lucky that year, he was in the pit in the Newcomers race for me as well.
He did your pit stop.
Yeah, he changed the visor, I think, from memory. There's a photograph of that somewhere as well. And Hizzy was I knew Hizzy well then, so in terms of having guidance really for the TT course, you couldn't get any better,
Not a bleed.
Yeah.
So was it always because your dad got pulled? This rainfall's getting stronger, isn't it? So we'll have to shout even louder. But when you went from the club scene, was it always in the insight to go to the Isle of Man? Was it always the plan?
Yeah, I think the Manx was the plan really, yeah.
Right.
So that was 91, and then I won the Newcomers race on the 750. I broke down in the junior on the 250, and then I finished second in the lightweight on the 250 at the end of the week. Dave Milling won it, actually.
So hold on, you went from the Newcomers race and then you went straight up on the podium in the main race.
Well, it was the Newcomers on the Monday.
Yes.
We did the junior on the Wednesday, and I started number 95 in that, I remember, so right at the back. And I think I was running about 6 when I stopped at Parliament Square. I think it was the last lap. And then Friday morning, I had a really good number. I was number 2, I think, for that. And I finished second to Dave Milling, who won the race in that one. Yeah. So I didn't stay. I could have stayed and obviously done the Manx again the following year, but I decided to go to the TT.
What sort of lap speeds were you doing back then?
I think it was the Newcomers was 112.5. I think the fastest lap.
Go on,
and
lads.
It was a good Graham Ward, actually. I think Graham was second. Graham, who's now helps Alec Tague run Superstock Lads. Harron?
Yeah, Brent Harron.
Yeah. Probably know Graham. And of course the legendary Nicholas Morgan was also in the Newcomers race that year of MSS Performance fame.
Nick Morgan did the TT?
Yeah, the Newcomers Manx, that was, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So
Did not know that.
I bet it's funny for the likes of yourself that you've been in the paddock so long and been so involved with it, and then it's such an incestuous little place that like everyone sort of knows everyone and so and so's sons, and it's like it is such a. Do you not?
It's a traveling. I like to think of it as a traveling circus. It's class, isn't it? Yeah. Every summer we all meet up, don't we, in the same places. Then we move on to the next one and move on to the next one.
Yeah.
But like you say, you've gone from. What was your first initial feeling to it? Because when you went to the Isle of Man, you must have thought, "Gee, I hope I like this." You know what I mean? And then, what was your first lap like? Describe like.
Yeah, I mean, what had I done? So because of the involvement with Robert, I think the first road race I did was Skerries.
Fair enough, the Isle of Man would have been a piece of piss after that.
And then we went to a place called Four in the south of Ireland the week after.
Is that a road race?
Yeah, and I actually quite like that one. I'm
going to hold my hands up. I've never even heard of that one.
Yeah, no, right. that one, that was a good one. Those two were together. I'm trying to think. I did the post TT at Boulogne as well on the Saturday. On a 250, and that was wet actually.
Back when men were men.
Yeah, so we did that. So I'd done a couple of road races before I went to the Newcomers Manx, and then first lap would have been on the 250. So yeah, but I'd done. I'd sort of geared up for it, I guess. Really, yeah.
But like continuing on to that, like so you thought, let's step up with the TT. Did you feel like a noticeable difference from going from the Manx to the TT?
Yeah, I mean it was. I as I say, it was morning practices, so it would have been a Monday morning.
Another men were men situation there.
And I got away pretty early, and I remember, I think the first two people that passed me were Foggy on a 400 V&M bike, and Brian Reid, I think, going through Glen Helen or something, when you just think...
At 5 a.m.
Yeah, you knew it were behind you when you turned around, didn't you?
Yeah.
And these guys are coming past, and... so that you were riding in that sort of company, and end of the day, I know it can only make you better, can't it? The two that was the year Hizzy won on the Norton,
right?
Yeah, so he was starting. I think he rode number 19, and I remember him passing me on the 250 on the first lap at the top of Bagaro, and it was like you'd never seen anything like it in your life, I mean, just sheer quality, and obviously. He passed you safely, but just sort of, could have almost ripped the paint off your bike, sort of thing, the difference in speed, yeah.
But like across all of your TT career, what was your favourite? If you could relive one race, what was your favourite race?
I like that.
Oh God, I don't know. I suppose the 250s were good to ride, yeah. But to pick on one race now, I don't know which one that would have been. But,
what was the closest? I know you've had quite a few seconds and thirds. What was the closest to a win that you got?
Yeah, I know. Sometimes you think of the ones you didn't finish. I hurt myself in '95 and had a really, really good TZ 250 from Dennis Trollope that year, and you just think that probably would have been a good chance. So sometimes it's not the ones you finish; it's the ones you maybe didn't even start. That you think back on.
Because it got James Hines on a Dennis Trollope bike, or he bought a bike from.
I think he did. Dennis, the last time 2019, Dennis was here, I guess, with it.
Mint.
But Dennis is obviously a real stalwart of motorcycle racing, and he's helped a lot of people. Obviously, Bruce Anstey had a lot of success with Dennis.
It's a shame he's not here this week. Bruce Anstey's unfortunately not racing at the Manx Grand Prix this year, which is a damn shame. I'd love to know the reason why, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to ask you one question and show up another photo why. But what was your scariest race you've ever done?
I know you've got a photo. That was, I think probably, again, I was in there was a, what would that have been? It would have been a Formula 1 race in 94. The one that they stopped after a lap. Nigel Davis was actually leading it at the time. They rerun it on the Sunday.
Right.
Because it rained, obviously. And I remember I came down Bagaro behind Philip McCallan. Philip had passed me. And it had started to rain heavily at the bottom of Bagaro. And I remember just being sideways there on a 750 Kawasaki. And that was probably an eye-opener, And I think they stopped it when we got back to the pits. Reran it the next day, and Hizzy just...
stormed off.
Demolished everyone, yeah.
But do you think they should run wet races now?
Times have changed so dramatically, Being back then, that was what we did. You did wet practices, you did if it was foggy on the mountain, you still, you had the half a lap or 2/3 of a lap to Ramsey, and then you found your way back over, didn't you? But it was what you were used to,
Oh, you see, but like yet again, another one for the YouTube follower. Look at this for another photo. How good the rooster tails coming off. I think they would cancel a short circuit meeting now with the amount of rain coming off. That is outstanding. Where is that on the course?
That's coming out of Bradden Bridge, that, on a 250 Honda. Yeah.
That is outstanding. You know what I mean? But now, like, it must be so difficult for the likes of, like, trying to pick the opportune racing conditions now. Because, like, the TD this year was a fair struggle, wasn't it? And the weather wasn't particularly bad, but there was, like, a lot of situations, wasn't there?
Yeah, a lot of it now, as you say, generally if you're getting rain, you're probably going to have mist on the high parts, and then the helicopter has to be, back then they just worry about carrying you back later, wouldn't they? Now it's, if the helicopter can't go, then the race isn't going to happen, so things have changed that much.
Did you have
obviously Northwest 200, we're racing in this year we would have used all the full range when we were at the Northwest 200, slicks, intermediates, wets, so.
Did you have many big injuries throughout your career?
Touch wood.
Yeah, 95 was, I hurt myself twice, so, leg breaks, ligaments, so that sort of thing, really, yeah.
Was that over here?
Here, it was in Ireland was the bigger one, really, but I had an accident here. It took me out for a little while, but yeah, I didn't come off the bike, actually. I had a rear suspension mount broke, and I glanced off a wall, and the front disc sliced a hole through my boot and cut my foot up and stuff like that. So yeah,
I noticed.
Well, you walk brilliant. You wouldn't think you've had half your foot slackened off there.
I noticed looking through your history that you finished on the podium twice in the year that you ended up retiring, which is quite rare. Like, people retire at the sort of top, if you like. What was your reasoning for retiring?
Well, I mean, I was doing less and less then. I was really just sort of like a TT racer, and then it was coming to the time where they wanted you to do so many races. This, I don't know what you have to do now. You've got to have done 6 races, haven't you, and that sort of thing before you can do the TT. I mean, at that time, I was basically sort of wheeling out for the TT, really.
It's still getting on the podium.
So it was something that wouldn't be allowed now anyway.
No.
But I started the motorcycle business in 2007. So,
and did that sort of just take over?
Yeah, it was one of those, really. I mean, okay, it was a centenary year, but it's, at the end of the day, it's another race. It's the same race, isn't it? You do it or you don't do it. I mean,
were you quite happy sort of walking away from the sport? Did you find the sort of crossover okay?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't, with starting the business, it was busy anyway. And obviously the Pirelli, I started with Pirelli in November 2006. So the BSB thing started and it was still, 2007 was the last year of the open tyre supply. So Pirelli were running R&D involvement in the UK with Rob McElnay with the Virgin team. And then still obviously Supersport with, at the time it would have been TAS. And thinking back, probably a couple of other teams. So there was, quite a bit to do, Spanish testing at the beginning of the year and all that sort of thing, as well as then the race programme and Northwest TT Ulster. So it was a busy enough year, that one, yeah, to take your mind off it, really, But yeah, you could lean on the fence at the TT and think, I wouldn't mind being practising now, but, that was about as far as it went, I guess, really.
I would never class you as a civilian, though. He's got deeper roots in the motorcycle racing than John McGuinness. He's bloody Pirelli and Metzler, for God's sake. You know what I mean? You're more involved than anyone else, without a doubt, on that side of things.
Do you feel like you sort of reached your potential within the sport?
I think it's always things you maybe would have done differently, but I mean, you only get one run at it, don't you? And that's it, really. So you can try harder, but on the other, it could go wrong.
Yeah. If you the thing is, everyone talks about now how Dean Harrison Hickman have changed the goalposts of road racing by doing more British. Well, he's perfectly in that timeline of the Hislops and Robert Dunlop, and he's got I think I've already said Steve Hislop, but they were all British front runners. Do you feel like you could have had that chance, or did you have that chance of doing British?
No, I did short circuit racing. When 92 would have been the first time at British Championship level.
Yeah.
On 250s, you know. I mean, when you think back now, you know, Ian Newton, Paul Marra-Brown, Steve Sawford, Jeremy McWilliams, Eugene McManus, Kevin Mitchell, you know, Ian Challoner, all these guys, you just keep going and going, really. I mean, the depth of the field back then was incredible. You know?
Yeah.
I think it was the end of that year. Even there was a battle for the championship, and I think Rob Mack and Neil Mackenzie rode 250 Loctite Yamahas as well. You know, in that race. So
yeah,
the field was just incredible then. You know, when you look back, great experience, great time to be riding. Really, you know,
without a doubt.
Wolsey Calder, all you keep going with the names. You know, yeah.
So when you were talking about briefly there, it's like, what would you have changed then? You know, you're saying I could have changed a few things. What would that have been?
I think, you know, there's times if you'd had a bit more money to do something or whatever, you would have done it. But I mean, you've got to work with what you got, haven't you? And you know, it's always at the end of the day, there's only one guy going to win the race, isn't there? You know, and that's it. So yeah, you know, I enjoyed it. Still here now. So walking around, a little few bumps about me, but yeah.
While you were racing, was it mainly as a sort of privateer, or did you sort of make a good living out of it?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the road racing, you know, that was the steer. You could pick up some money doing that, obviously, and I did quite a few Irish races as well. And you could, you know, if you had a good weekend, obviously you'd do okay out of it. You didn't have to use as many tyres, obviously, because you could reuse stuff or whatever. So
you weren't on like 9 sets a weekend.
Yeah,
like
no, you were. I mean, I can, you know, I'd remember going to Killer Lane in the south of Ireland and getting man of the meeting and winning the 2 big races and not putting a new tyre on the bike, you know, that type of thing. And you were still racing with James Courtney or, you know, Adrian Archibald and people like that. So you were pushing on, but
class.
What sort of money would you take home from a weekend like that?
15 grand a weekend.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. Back in the day, then I mean, it was probably the man of the meeting thing might have been 500 quid, you know,
class.
And then obviously the race wins on top of that. And if you know you obviously had your ferry paid and a bit of expenses or whatever, you would have gone. You would actually have returned more than the guy who won the corresponding British Championship race that weekend.
Really,
but he was obviously being paid to ride, wasn't he, at the time, or whatever that would have been, you know. But yeah.
Did you ever? Now I've seen you at Macau plenty of times. Have you ever raced around Macau?
Yeah, I did.
Right.
I nearly went just after I'd started, and that was one of those ones, you know, when I won the Manx, it must have been the following year, and I remember speaking to Mike Trimby, and at the time he said, I don't know, you know, I'll freight the bike, but you pay or whatever for yourself. And it's one of those ones where you're looking what money you got, and I thought, oh no, I can't do it, you know.
Yeah.
So I put it out of my mind, and then I rode a V&M Yamaha at the Ulster Grand Prix in whatever, that must have been 2000, I think, with David Jeffries. And I think Jim Moody was due to go to Macau with them, and he broke his ankle or something. So Jack rang me, probably, you know, a week before the race, and said, do you want to ride the bike? So I went from thinking I'd never ever go and ride it to then going. And I did it in 2000. Unfortunately, the bike broke. 2001, I think I got knocked off, and I finished about 9th in 2002. And then I started working for Yamaha at the end of 2003, and didn't go then, you know, because the job took over. So yeah,
and that explains the McGuinness link in 2004.
Yeah,
because we bumped into him at the paddock because he was out. We were like, I got you crack about Jason, think of it, like get a pub story or something like that. He goes, oh no, because of Jason, he got me the Yamaha ride, which got his first superbike win.
Yeah, no, he'd. I'm trying to think. He would have ridden Hondas in 2003. That was the World Supersport thing that he did.
Right.
And I think that must have been a 954 blade or something at the TT that year. And then, 2004 would have been... That was a year of a new R1, I think. 2004, I think it was a new model year. The plan was Yamaha France were going to build a bike for John, and mine was coming from Rob Mack's place. And as usually happens with these things, nothing quite goes to plan, and the French bike was late coming. I'd actually gone, working for Yamaha in sales, I'd gone to Japan with Andy Smith, for some new model introductions there where you get to ride a couple of new bikes. So I missed the first practice, but with the bike being late, then John got the bike that was built at Rob Mack's place, and I waited for the French bike to come. So yeah, that was, he will have won the Formula 1 race and was leading, I think, the senior when I think the clutch went or something on his bike. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I know you briefly just touched upon the Ulster Grand Prix, but obviously you were very successful around there. Pippin, Joy Dunlop to a win one year. What was that?
Is that you showing him the line on that photo? You want to hook it in a bit more, Joy?
Yeah, that's up on the start line, I think, in 96 or something at the TT. But I was fortunate to, again, going right back to the links with Robert was the introduction to Joey, so... Yeah, great guy to be around and to race with.
Were you sort of, that race, Hickman and Lee were passing each other like that? Were you kind of like that? I know it was a tight finish.
We had a really good race at the Southern 100 in 94, in the championship race then, which was 12 laps back then. It was longer than it is now.
Jesus.
And it went down to the last lap. But it was, when you think of Joey, I knew Joey pretty well. Obviously, he kept himself to himself a lot of the times, but... he'd ridden the 125 that morning, and it had been damp. It was wet. It was a damp day basically, and I only had one race that day, which was a championship race. And if I think back, he won the 750 race on the Tuesday night. I won the one on the Wednesday night. So this was then the big race of the week on the Thursday, and he'd won the 125 that morning and seen the conditions. And we went to the lining up area there, on the dummy road or whatever, and I had intermediates in my bike, so we both sat there, and he actually said to me, get those intermediates out and put slicks in. He was sat there on slicks, and he could have said nothing and just left it, but the mark of the man was, he said, you don't,
if I'm going to beat
you don't need those, you need slicks. So then we raced for the 12 laps, and I passed him going in the town corner. We'd passed each other before, but yeah, just beat him over the line. But if he'd said nothing, that just really shows what he was like, I guess.
I'm saying this now, there won't be a single racer alive now doing that, will there? no way. God's going to be like, it's on intermediates, get in. Here we go, I'm off to Rotterdam.
But no, great race. And, you knew when you were racing with him in terms of style, safety, all that sort of thing, it was all top notch.
Oh, class. Who's been your, is that answered in this next question? Who's been your favourite racer, your favourite competitor to be on track with?
Oh, I guess, I think it's difficult when, with a lot of those guys, some of the 250 races then at the Northwest and stuff were that close, you were racing so closely with some of those names, really.
Yeah.
But, standout race would have been that one. I had that was the same year in 94, I had a great Ulster Grand Prix race. The first race was with Joey and Philip, and then the second race, something had happened to Joey's bike. I think it was me and Philip, so they were great races as well, but some of those Ulster Grand Prix races in 600 races later on were very, very close, so you're in close company for a lot of the time. Yeah.
Class, man. Absolutely class.
Well, obviously,
very jealous.
Obviously, over here at the moment, and it's the Manx Grand Prix now. Dom was sort of filling us in on a little bit of the history of the Manx and the Classic, and like the sort of what the changes of how it's going. Do you want to sort of explain that what recently changed?
To be honest, a lot has changed recently, because I'm trying to think because the Manx Grand Prix has always been, it's centenary. Someone correct me on my enunciation there. That's the one, but is that in 2 years from now? So this next year is the 100th year of the Manx Grand Prix. Is that correct?
I think you're right. Yeah.
So the history of the club's been there for years. So no, the TT has always been run by the government. So the Manx Grand Prix is actually a club, so it relies on supporters, but obviously them essentially hiring the track off the government. There's always been like a bit of cross-pollination, shall we say? But it's always been known as a little bit more of an amateur TT, hasn't it, with the Manx being club level. But it seemed, I'm trying to think what year it was. I think it was 2000. This is testing my knowledge here. 2013 or 14 when the Classic TT got introduced. But at that point, they always had classic races within the Manx Grand Prix races. But then at that point, I think Ryan Farquhar was actually one of the first crossover TT riders that actually came from that. But then that's when they separated the classes off, saying, but this is now the Classic TT and this is the Manx, because they didn't want the history getting affected, really. And ever since then, it's always been the Classic TT and the Manx. But this year, it's all fallen back into the same category. But like every human nature, no one likes change, don't they? So it's gone from what it was to something different, now back to what it was. But it's mental, isn't it?
It seems to be a lot quieter than it has done in the past.
At the moment, it's been a bit. The paddock is really quiet this year. Like normally, you always compare it against the TT, and we've had 2 to 3 years without the TT, and it's been like, whoa, this is a shock to system, and everyone was trying to get back to the returning party. But this year, everyone's a lot more forcing with a plan, really, because normally they always try and run it tonight, don't they, on the Saturday, and then not enough marshals normally turn up, and then the back plan was to run it on the Sundays. So now tomorrow, because we're here ruining his Saturday evening at 7 o'clock on a night, and it's so we're going to be running tomorrow. That's the plan. So hopefully the paddock will fill up a little bit more, but there are less entries this year. They've had to lower the numbers for the safety element, and it's mad, isn't it? You've to move forward, things have to be sacrificed, and it seems to be that case here.
Also, Dom's getting to tick a massive thing off the bucket list this week, losing
my virginity. There's a girl
running number 1 in the 250 race. So going off down. Did you ever run number 1?
Yeah. I think only 1 year.
In what class?
It would have been in all classes, but I only started a Formula 1 race, I think, and that was it. I didn't ride anything else that week after getting hurt. Yeah.
How did you find?
For God's sake! After I get it, cheers, Jason. Thanks for the pep talk, son.
I thought you started wearing dark glasses because there's number 1.
Oh God, no, I bleeding wish. No, I'm medically bound to these things now. Medically bound to them. But there we go. But so I'm going to change my number. I'm going to have to ring Paul Phillips after this. Please, God, change my number.
I'll grab the Patreon questions up.
But no, I tell you what, 2-stroke. So I taught, like, my first ever experience on a 2-stroke was John Chapman's bike, 2019, and I went down Bray Hill. Never ridden a 2-stroke, never even ridden a motocross 2-stroke. And it was just, and everyone, this is one of my favourite stories, is like, everyone says the same things when it comes to 2-stroke. Goes, you'll love it, Dominic. Quickly followed by, but it's going to hot seize, it's going to cold seize, it'll seize if you go left, it'll seize when it goes right. Always cover the clutch, don't roll the throttle, don't crisp this, make sure that's right, always keep an eye on the temperature gauge. Whatever you do not go uphill, but you will love it. And I'm going, how do you ride one of these things? And my respect for those bikes are phenomenal, because I'll send the photo to Grace, and I've got a photo of me coming over Balacry, right? And it just went vert, like Max Biaggi vert. And there's a photo of me, like negative throttle, trying to bring it down. There is no engine braking at all in them motorcycles. And I tell you what, have you got any? I did probably the worst thing, and I'm going to repeat that mistake and ask for advice. So what is your best advice you can give to me, first of all, for going down the road at number 1 and 2-strokes? What's the best advice?
I guess in terms of 2-strokes, don't get carried away and jet it too lean, because
right.
I remember insisting on doing that once and getting it wrong. So yeah, I mean, that's something you could do without doing. And the number 1 thing, I mean, it's great, isn't it, to go off at number 1, but you've only got people chasing you then at the end of the day, so you've got to try and be on your game. Yeah.
Definitely. Oh God, I'm looking forward to it. Absolutely looking forward to it. But there we go. So we've got any Patreon, Chris?
Yeah, I've got quite a few who've sort of naturally gone through, like during the interview. Let's have Peter Thompson was saying about the final TT when you were on the podium. Did you know at that time that you were going to retire?
Yeah, I did. I decided really myself that was it.
So
yeah.
Do you know the last race that week? Were you lining up on the grid thinking this is the last time I'm going to go down there?
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah, that would have been a senior race, and actually I had a problem with the bike, so I stopped in that race. So I didn't finish my last race. Yeah, the TT. I'm trying to think now. I think I rode the Ulster Grand Prix that year. I think after, so that would have been my last.
We've been doing these podcasts for ages, and like out of all the people that have retired, you seem the most like as if, oh yeah, I finished, and then I just sort of went on to the next thing, and as if it wasn't a big deal. Like, is that the way you sort of? You just seem to have like got another job and kind of kept busy, but just switch your focus across to something.
Yeah, but the thing was, I'd been doing less racing, I guess, Chris. So it sort of weaned off it really. Yeah. And when you're doing other things, I think when I did the year in 2004 when John rode with on the Yamaha, I was working for Yamaha, and as I say, been in Japan for Yamaha business, and usually missing the first practice would probably have really sort of freaked me out, but it was almost relaxing to ride the bike then, it had become a different thing. So it felt different, and it just felt, it was more enjoyable really than putting yourself under a load of pressure, I guess. So that was the way it worked, and it was great. I'm at the TT, I'm going to ride the bike, rather than all this big build up and thinking about it. You've been busy doing something else, so it just arrived then, and it was easier to enjoy it, I guess. Well, and still remain fairly competitive, I suppose.
There we are.
Question
Great advice.
from Lee Bartram. What does Jason think of the proposed changes for next year's TT with the new extended race program and senior on the Saturday?
That's good. That's good, aye.
Yeah, I mean,
what are the proposed changes?
Extra stock 1,000 race. That's right, yep. So 2 stock 1,000 races and an extra super twin race.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah, and one less super sport then, is it, I think? Is it?
One less?
It's one race, isn't it, instead of 2, I think.
No way.
I think so, but I thought you'd know that.
I don't know. I'm looking with a blind expert. That is interesting. We'll have to dig that one.
I'm not sure on that one, but I mean, it seems like a lot of racing. The weather obviously being a key factor in it all.
Yeah.
We raced the senior on Saturday this year, but I mean, looking at it from the side of the racing, as I say, what's going to happen weather-wise, how many races are going to run close together and things like that. I mean, if they get perfect weather, but how often does that happen? So, yeah.
got some, everyone was in paddling pools at Thruxton, screaming for air conditioning a week ago, and here we are. Yeah. And it's pissing down. Yeah. Welcome back.
And it definitely makes it 3 full weekends. It's going to be an interesting programme. Let's see how the BSP program relates to road racing where the Northwest 200 fits in. It sounds like it's going to be busy and hectic.
Without a doubt.
I'm not sure if you'll have seen this, because obviously you've been busy at work today, but MotoGP have just announced that from next year they're going to be running a sprint race on a Saturday at every round.
Right.
What do you think that'll... do you follow MotoGP very closely?
I follow it. I wouldn't say, incredibly closely, but I do follow it. Mm-hmm. So that's obviously an interest in innovation. Yeah. Speaking
of Thruxton, obviously it was quite a big deal for BSB that we had Tito Rabat, obviously ex-Moto2 world champion, join the series for Tag Honda, and it was obviously a big talking point going into the weekend. Famously, Gregorio Lavila from Spain as well came to Thruxton for the first time ever and won on his debut.
Yeah.
And there was lots of talk about how Tito get on. Obviously, he's been racing. He's actually leading the Spanish Superbike Championship at the moment, and he's used to Pirellis and all that sort of stuff. But not used to riding bikes without electronics, and obviously never been to Thruxton. We personally had I put a thing in my team group chat, I said I'll give £10 to the person who gets the closest. What will Tito's best result this weekend be? And I thought P10, and then pretty much there was my electronics guy Simon said P8, and then quite a few people said sort of P15, P16 around that. His best result of the weekend was P26, which of my team, there was only one person who was Roy, my tyre guy, who said he'll struggle to get in the top 20. He was the only person that was sort of correct.
Have you paid him?
No, I haven't actually, but I will.
Cheap
I will. I'll give him the tenner next time out. Were you surprised by or did you expect him to sort of be last?
Yeah, I didn't think back to Lavia. I didn't make any comparison really. And whilst I tend not to focus on individual riders within the job, I mean,
you must be sick of them all. To be fair, I'm fed up with a lot of you.
My expectation, I didn't really have an expectation of him. It didn't surprise me. I'm sure he was surprised by the circuit. I'm sure it was a bit of an eye opener. I guess it's a good warm up for Cadwell Park if you're going to do it. But
Apparently, it said to someone something like, "This isn't superbikes. It's like a cross between superbikes and flat track."
Yeah.
What do you say? Yeah, which is true because it is like.
And let's face it, the competitiveness of BSB is always going to make it difficult.
Yeah,
So, it's a difficult place to go for Uxton, as you say, with so wide open and no reference points and things like that. And it just show how well Livia did.
Do you know, of the history of your job in BSB, who's been the most sort of annoying rider that's like always coming and whinging at you about like, the tyres and?
No, I don't. I don't think there's anyone in particular. There's people. There's people you expect to have a direct approach, I guess. But it's been a long time, and I've dealt with, I suppose, thousands by now of people with, who've all got
thousands of annoying
issues. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Do you know, like now and again, it doesn't matter which tyre manufacturer, you're always going to get the odd duff tyre. And there's probably, people probably use or had a duff tyre more than they actually did. Like it is probably more common in the excuse book than it is in reality. But if you had to say sort of 1 in 100, 1 in 500, 1 in 1,000 tyres, how many duff tyres is there really?
It must be such a small percentage.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of what we do, what you can get is you can certainly get a tyre damaged in transport when you're moving so many of them.
Yeah.
And what would happen or does happen is generally anything like that gets picked up in the service anyway. So by the time it's gone through the fitting machine and the balance with 2 different guys looking at it, something like that will get picked up. So in terms of when you're looking at percentages of things like that,
now and again, like
it's minimal. If within 1,500 tyres you're pulling 1 tyre out that doesn't even get on track, you're the maths expert.
Is that the sort of numbers you're talking about?
That's the sort of numbers you're looking at, yeah. And like I say, generally that would be something from transport, and it might just be something that ultimately is cosmetic and no more than that. But obviously, because we see it, we wouldn't put it out there,
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
because
it's the factory. From my side, I'm pretty comfortable. The factory is in Germany. They do a good job. I mean, the Germans are renowned for engineering and precision, so that sits well with me and makes my job a bit easier.
I just love the competitive. Hold on, where are Dunlops made now? The French bought out Dunlop, didn't they, in Birmingham? Is that correct?
Well, I mean, the production they use is from France. Yeah,
it is.
The production facility in Birmingham went, whatever it was, 5 years ago, I think.
Yeah. You see, that's what I love about motorsport. It always just filters, competitive nature always filters down, doesn't it? Because you know what I mean? Now that the Pirelli's made in Germany, so it'll be the Germans against the French, and then it'll be something from there. Then the chemical experts will be having a fight with each other.
Do you know the whole issues going on in Russia and Ukraine? Does that affect the tyre supply?
Yeah. Earlier this year, it was definitely a bigger factor in some of the car motorsport productions.
I was actually speaking to one of the Eurosport commentators. I was down commentating on the Suzuka 8 Hour.
Name drop.
And in between stints, I was speaking to one of the car commentators.
Yeah.
And he was saying that it's maybe not Pirelli. I don't know what the manufacturer is, but they're having massive problems, and I think that is linked with the Russian thing.
Yeah. It's definitely affected the car side more than it has our side, fortunately. Yeah.
Well, thank God for that. I'm a bike fan, so the cars can have a problem for a change with all their billions. But I'm very biased, Chrissy. I'm not going to lie. I'm very biased.
Do you think... 'cause it's a funny one with tyres. Obviously, the tyre manufacturers want their tyres to do the fastest lap. And often that's why sort of qualifying tyres are brought in, because it's almost like a bit of a dick swinging competition of like, you might only get 1 or 2 laps out of it, but if like Pirelli can do this lap time, it's good to sort of sell tyres on. However, in terms of financially, you kind of want tyres to, well, there's two sides of it. The teams are kind of wanting, and the riders are wanting tyres that are going to last it, minimise the number of tyres, where obviously the tyre manufacturer, it's in their interests to use as many tyres as possible to get more revenue. Do you think there'll be a shift more to sort of more qualifying, like softer tyres and you get more through? Or do you think the environmental movement is going to have a big push on because like environmentally it's like, let's say if you were an eco warrior and you came to BSB and you seen people putting a set of tyres on for 5 laps and then going into landfill, it's like, at the same time,
right though,
if you believe that the world is like on the edge of destruction, and you like say there's loads of people that do genuinely believe that and who are happy to like lie down on the M25 to stop cars going to work.
Idiot.
At the same time, if you seen what was going on in like racing, there's a sort of
Chris, seriously, after this question, right, and this sport gets cancelled, I will personally bury you in the woods.
Do you feel like is there much of an environmental push at the moment on things, or is the blind spot until I've pointed it out?
Yep, Jason,
you've probably escalated it. No, I think within BSB there's an awareness of what everything that's come in with the electrification and everything like that. So, it's something that we've got to be aware of. And you saw MotoGP change their allocation this year slightly. Not a lot, but
what happens to the tyres? Like, do they just go on landfill after?
Nah, they go back and they made into bases for school playgrounds and all that sort of thing.
Recovered.
So there's always this element of recycle and reuse.
I'm trying to think.
City's just single-handedly save motorsport.
Road bases, all these type of things.
Saving children's lives, Chrissy. That's what we're doing.
I've got a load of tyres, obviously like used tyres and I'm desperately trying to think what can I make out of them to then recycle them into like to make some money. So I'm thinking like, I don't want to give my business ideas away, so I'll keep them. If anyone has got any good ideas, though, let us know.
And then we'll nick them and make the money.
I'm desperately trying to think of something cool.
Flower pots for me mum. She's got millions of them, just painted white. They are, man. There's a couple of sets of metallers for you. Happy birthday.
We've got them, to be fair, like in my garden.
Oh, you do. I think every bike racer has the same thing.
In terms of, so obviously this podcast is going to go out, and this week you're going to be racing, so
indeed,
obviously best of luck with that. And then we're off to Cadwell Park next weekend, so big weekend. For anyone that's watching, there's an open pit lane BSB evening on this Friday, so 5 till 8 p.m. I believe it's free entry as well. So if anyone wants to come, it'll just be superbikes out for 3 hours, and it'll be and obviously the rest of the weekend, fantastic circuit to spectate at. I think camping tickets will be sold out by now, but the entry tickets are still open, so it'll be a class weekend. And then have you got on?
I was going to give a shout out to Bennett's. I got to have a safety car lap around Thruxton. I've never even driven to the circuit in my life, so I got absolutely spoiled that day. What a circuit! What them safety car laps? You have to be a Bennett's customer to apply for one of these laps. I cannot recommend it high enough, because them boys do not hang about either. Like I just said to them, come on mate, just try and scare us. And I'm like that going, how tight is the seatbelt? Jesus, they were flying.
Yeah, so you'd never been to Thruxton, had you?
Never been to Thruxton. I'm going to be very honest, in my opinion, which is not going to be very popular, crap place to watch.
Oh yeah.
There's obviously there's some highlighted points which are brilliant, but it's not like let's talk Cadwell. You know what I mean? You can get everywhere around Cadwell, and you can see the racing the entire way around. But Thruxton's very a difficult place to watch. It was definitely,
I would say it's probably the worst spectating. It's great to ride, but as a spectator, it's probably the last one I would recommend to come and watch at. There's not a great deal happening.
Happy days, but shame you're not hanging around a bit longer. You could have got a flight with Jason here. They split the flight. Are you flying or driving?
No, I'm driving.
Oh God, love you. I couldn't. No, that is literally the only thing I don't like about the Isle of Man. Is that boat. It's torturous. But have we got anything else there, Chrissy? Or
I have actually got.
Have you got anything else? Would you like to ask? We never ask the guests that. We just stop the show. We're like, and that's us done. See you later.
Yeah. In terms of obviously we've already plugged the hire business, so for people coming over here, they can get in touch literally just around the corner from the airport. And obviously, if any of Isle of Man residents, there's plenty of motorbikes here and nice gear.
You're going to help me wheel out the 765 Moto 2 bike he's got in the top corner there. That's what I'm racing.
Got some nice bikes. Just a little shout out for me. I was speaking to Lundy the other day, and as we've already mentioned, Lundy's retired from racing, selling some stuff, and he was selling he's been racing in the CB500 class, and he got speaking to someone, like selling some wheels to this guy, and the guy said, "Oh, your name's familiar." And he said, "Oh, do you listen to the podcast?" And they got chatting to a guy called Tom Middleton, and it transpires Tom actually got into racing from this podcast, like big fan of the podcast, and,
ruining lives.
Yeah, decided to buy himself a CB500 road bike, turn it into a race bike, and goes racing. So I just thought,
so Lundy's going an extra 200 quid. Get in. Yeah. I'm not knocking anything off this, son.
Just a shout out and best of luck for the rest of the season. And yeah, huge thank you to all of our patrons, to our sponsor Colchester Kawasaki, and thanks ever so much for your time and coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it. Have you? I don't suppose you do any sort of social media or anything, do you?
I'm totally out of social media. It's never really stepped in, so it's washed over me, all of that.
There we are. Well, we know where he is every BSB weekend. He's at the Pirelli truck. So if you want to go say hi, by all means, there you go. But honestly, thank you so much for your time. It's great to have you on. And we'll catch you later on.
All the best. Take care.
Thank
See you in a
guys.
bit.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Chasin The Racin, powered by Colchester Kawasaki, part of the Global Moto Group. We supply new Aprilia, Moto Guzzi, Vespa, Royal Enfield, Kawasaki, Sim, Mutt and Benelli motorcycles.